If you're a military spouse who's ever felt like a passenger in your own life, this episode is for you. Today on Serious Talk, the Military Minute, I'm sitting down with Emily Skelton, a former middle school math teacher from small town Nebraska who traded lesson plans for PCS orders, deployments, and eventually a tech career she can take with her anywhere. Emily opens up about what it really feels like to say yes to the adventure of military life. Being alone more as you get older, raising kids while your spouse is gone, and refusing to let her own dreams stay on the back burner. She shares how one simple conversation at the Family Readiness Center completely changed her trajectory, pointing her towards Salesforce, hiring our heroes, and the Merivis program that helped her break into a remote, flexible, high-demand tech role before her husband retired. We'll talk about the mindset shifts that helped her move from, I'll just wait until he gets out, to I'm allowed to invest in myself now, and how skills you already use every day as a spouse, parent, volunteer, or caregiver translate directly into the kind of problem-solving leadership and adaptability that thrive in the civilian and tech world. That's what this show is all about, connecting the dots between military life and real modern career paths, especially in ecosystems like Salesforce. So if you've ever wondered, is my career on hold until this chapter is over? Or do I actually bring anything valuable into a tech role? Stick around. Emily's story is proof that you don't have to choose between supporting the mission and building something meaningful for yourself. There are resources, communities, and paths designed with you in mind. And today, we're going to walk through them together. Emily Skelton, great to have you on Serious Talk, the Military Minute today. Been looking forward to this for a minute. Again, just researching, getting ready for today's episode. I cannot believe you've been here just under 2 years. It feels like you've been here a little bit longer, mainly because of the things that you were asked to do right out of the gate. So we'll get into some of that today, but great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
This is a good story. Good story. All right. So one of the things we'd like to start out with, obviously we know you're a military spouse. We'll get into some of that today, but there was an Emily before that. So tell me a little bit about Emily growing up, or what was some of the most significant things you remember about your life before marrying a service member and becoming a passenger in your own life? What were you up to?
Well, I am originally from Nebraska, and I kind of think the Midwestern mentality is, hard work, and it's usually a farming community. I did not grow up on a farm, but farm adjacent. My dad worked in ag sales. He was an ag teacher. And that's the path I actually ended up taking, became a teacher, and I taught math, and I thought I'd be a teacher my whole life until I met this really nice guy who wouldn't stop calling. And I will say, I've always had an adventurous spirit. And so I always thought I would maybe teach overseas or do something like that. So I think kind of jumping onto the military lifestyle was not crazy for me. I think I was maybe perfect for that. So before the Emily I am now, which is also a mom, I was the youngest child, spoiled rotten. And I really just had a great childhood and a great time in the Midwest. Funny enough, I don't see myself going back there. I'm in North Carolina now on the East Coast, and I like being at the beginning of everything. I say when you're on the East Coast time zone, everything happens here first.
The sun rises on the east, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed. Was there other service members in your family or military spouses? Was this something you were around growing up?
Well, my dad served and my grandparents served, but nobody ever did a career. Rather than being drafted, my dad talks about joining the Marines. And my dad is he's a very intelligent man, very more soft spoken. When you think of a Marine, you think
those aren't adjectives that typically go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but he, for him, in the same spirit, he said, I wanted to do something where I didn't know anybody and what to him sounded like really wild and out there, which was join the Marines. And so he did that. And it's really interesting to talk to him about his experiences. But my grandparents both served as well. And funny enough, now my kids are really asking about that. But when I was a kid, it wasn't really an opportunity that we even considered, partly because probably I'm a girl. And I always like to pick on my dad about that. But yeah, it wasn't even something that we thought about, but it was always there. We always knew that everybody had served.
Yeah. I mean, doing these podcasts, I've had a passion for the military for a long time, but I think you can be in a town where there's a strong presence. We even see the Hummers driving through town quite a bit because we're off a fairly major thoroughfare. So I see them. And it's just the things you ask questions about. And I remember as a kid going to parades or going to a cemetery on Veterans Day where they would have memorials and whatnot. And was just in a conversation this past week. I went to a veterans thing last Tuesday on Veterans Day and was talking to a Vietnam vet. And there was a colonel that was from Georgia. I don't remember what town he was from, but he spoke. And he said one of the things that they really want to see come back are military parades on either Veterans Day or Memorial Day or 4th of July, something like that. And in particular, next year being the nation's 250th birthday, of having a parade to celebrate our nation. And I happen to have a friend that's on the board here in town. And I said, hey, I got a bone to pick with you. We got to make sure. He said, it's already on the docket. I said, fantastic. Count me in. Whatever you need volunteer. So I had not even really thought about that being a big thing next year, but certainly the town you grow up in, and if there's a base nearby or maybe it's a town that doesn't have a lot of options. So a lot of people go to the military to find a way to have a career outside of whatever the local town thing is. But all right, great. Just always like to know where people start. Like, how in the world do you find yourself in this place?
Can I ask you another question? Have you, especially being, you're in Georgia, right?
Right.
So have you ever seen anybody, it wasn't until I went to college, but I didn't realize there's a whole community of people who reenact battles.
I have seen a couple. I've not been to any, but I've seen like coverage of them. But I had a friend growing up. She was kind of a loner, if you will, but she sewed uniforms for the reenactments and whatnot. So when she passed away about 10 years ago, and like 20 of these people showed up in full wool, she, like Civil War reenactments was the ones that she went to and made uniforms for, and they all showed up in the full wool outfits and the long dresses and all that. And people get into that. It's a whole nother culture.
Civil War reenactments for sure, but there are, all of the battlefields. I never knew about that. There's a whole subculture there. I had a friend I went to college with. His parents were really into that. And it was kind of neat. Because historically, then you start learning more than you would really in school about those kind of battles. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, there was at the Veterans Day ceremony last week, they're called Sons of the Revolution and Daughters of the Revolution. And they were in Revolutionary War garb. And it was 26 degrees last Tuesday morning in Georgia. If you haven't been to Georgia, give it half hour. It was 50 that afternoon, but that morning it was cold. So they moved it inside a gym, and they brought real black powder muskets and fired them off. So they would like march to the front of the gym. They opened the door, stepped outside, fired them. You could actually smell the black powder warping into the gym, but seeing them in that garb and speaking the way they would have spoke and command a march and all those types of things. It's cool. I hated history as a kid, but the older I get, the more I study it and really appreciate it. So cool. All right. So let's turn the chapter. This guy who would not stop calling, as you have named him. So was he from there? Like, how did you come to meet a veteran in the town you were in, or a service member at the time, I guess?
Right. So, born and raised in Nebraska, my great adventure was my first teaching job was in Colorado. And it was on the western slope in an area called Delta. It was it still is a very small town. And I had a bunch of like brand new teachers were there. And we all went to this charity dinner at a place called the Elks Lodge. And here was this really good looking guy who was in town on leave. And at that point, now I know he was with a MEU, which is a like floating ships. Okay, for active duty people, they're going to say I said that so wrong. But, he was back from this MEU deployment in between before he went on another one. And they like called him up on stage, and I just thought he was the coolest thing ever. So he came out with my friends and I, and we just had a really good time. And
so you connected a dot I didn't see there. So you got certified to be a teacher, and you left home to go somewhere else and teach. That was a pretty big move. You did that on your own. Okay.
Yeah, it was for me, like looking back now, Colorado doesn't seem that far. But for me, I thought Colorado was wild, so exciting.
Yeah. It's quite different than Nebraska, though, for sure.
It is, yes. It was a great place. It still is a great place. Colorado, the air just feels so much cleaner up there. It's a good place.
There's something about mountain air for sure. Yeah. Is he from Colorado, or did he just happen to be stationed there?
Yeah, no, he wasn't stationed there. So his mother is there. So he was just home on leave.
Oh, wow.
And they had this big dinner, and it was like it was a charity dinner, and they called him up on stage. They're like hometown hero. So it kind of feels like a Hallmark movie.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we can get you on film at some point.
Right.
Thinking back to the beginning of that journey. So obviously y'all dated, and we'll fast forward to you're married and that you're now part of this. Are there some things, think about somebody, say you got a daughter or a niece that winds up dating a soldier, and you're going to pass some advice on to them. Are there things that you experienced, learned, encountered during those first months or even years looking back? I hear a lot of times a military spouse kind of becomes a passenger, and like you go wherever they go, and those typically aren't in the city. They're out in the, in the boondocks, and there's not a lot of job opportunities. So in a lot of ways, you kind of set your own career aside by marrying into that life. So do you remember those years as being that way for you? How did that go?
I do. Something I really remember in the same way is like, what would I say to somebody else? I had a cousin who was in the Army forever. And at that point, I think he was like 20, 25 years in. And it was just meant to be. I was able to see his wife, and we were just kind of chatting at a family reunion. And I said, "Hey, I'm kind of dating this Marine. What do you think? Like, as you reflect back, what do you would say about this lifestyle?" And she would say that it was fun the adventure was fun when she was young, but the older she gets, the harder it is to be alone. And it really stuck with me because it's true. In my 20s, I was like, to my husband, I was like, take all the deployments. I had all these great goals while he was gone. I would learn something new. I took language classes. Don't ask me anything in Spanish right now. I've forgotten it all. But I did all these fun things while he was gone. And then as we get older, thankfully timing works out. He's towards the end of his career. But I see what they mean. Like now when you have children, I would like for him to be here for some of these experiences. I don't want him to have to miss a holiday if he doesn't have to anymore. But I think I always knew, I was really thankful to have mentors in that way. And so I think I would say the same thing to somebody else if they were to ask me. If my daughter met a guy in the military or she herself wanted to join, I think I would say, do you know yourself? Like what are you okay with? Are you okay being alone? And are you okay to say yes to adventure? Because I don't think what people say is maybe the negative side, I don't think is really all that negative. I think there's huge blessings in adversity or challenges. And I think there's a really neat community that I would not have been a part of if it hadn't been for this life. So yeah.
Good point. Yeah, I think my wife and I just celebrated 30 years a few months ago. Saying I do is an adventure in and of itself, right? You're kind of agreeing to being broke, living on corn dogs and ramen noodles for a couple of years, right, and figuring out life together. So at least in this case, y'all kind of have a sponsor. The government's going to pay for you to do some of these moves.
Right.
And well, great. That's good to hear. I agree with you that. And we've had a few military spouses on here thus far, but we have quite a few that work here, and then speaking with them, whether it was during the HOH fellowship or whatnot, there's always really positive vibes from that experience. No regrets. Never hear regrets from that. Yeah, and that's great to hear. You do hear some hard stories. I'm sure special ops and some of those spouses might have a different story because they don't even know where their spouse is half the time, and may see it on Reddit or on CNN and what are you doing there? Yeah. I'm sure that's a harder life of just dealing with the unknowns. And for 20, 25 years of the active war going on, I was talking to, I think, Monte about a lot of the PTSD stats. And one of the great surprises in me researching that was about kind of breaking veterans down into those that served before 9/11 and after. And the thought being, those that served before, you had the Vietnam War and the Korean War, and you had different conflicts, those two wars. And then you have the Afghan or the War on Terror that went on for multiple decades. There are kids that are now soldiers who never saw their parents because they served their entire life up until this point that are still active. And those are different stories. But man, I love podcast technology. I love the fact that people are out there telling their stories. There's some remarkable people to meet, and particularly the older generation. That ceremony I went to last week, probably 80% of the people there that were veterans were over 75, 80 years old. Sure. And that generation didn't come home and talk about anything. No. So I'm glad those stories are being told while they're alive to tell them, and we can share those experiences and whatnot. So.
Well, I think you would love this. We had the Marine Corps ball last weekend, and there was a veteran from World War II, which we don't have a lot of those left. He's 102. And so Part of the ceremony is that the oldest Marine there cuts the cake, and I think he takes the first bite and gives it then to the youngest Marine, who was born in 2007. So it was pretty neat to get to meet that gentleman and shake his hand. So that was cool.
Yeah, they shared in this. I need to look these stats up and make sure I'm saying them right. But they were talking about Vietnam and Korea and World War II. How many people are still alive from that? I think the last Pearl Harbor survivor just died not long ago. A good friend of mine was actually he was at Pearl Harbor. He was on a boat. He survived the attack, and as a teenager, he was just a guy in my church. And just the nicest, sweetest family. He died about 10 years ago. His wife died last year. Remarkable people. all the great things that you conjure up in your mind about that
Right.
generation, they were
The
that. Like
greatest, yeah.
they could have been on the cover of the book.
Right.
But I mean, I remember being a teenager and him saying, "Hey, I've had this thing and I was writing and it's on a floppy disk and it's not working. Can you help me?" And I was studying computers. I was a nerd, and I helped him
Right.
out, not even realizing what I was doing. And
Mm-hmm.
then probably 2 years later, he gave me a bound color copy of the book that he wrote, and it was about the
Wow.
people he served with and those he survived and those he lost. Man, I wouldn't take anything in the world for that now. Just a remarkable guy. But that greatest generation truly was just a really great group of people to talk to. So your husband's still in?
Yes. And just one more, when he was in boot camp is when 9/11 happened. And at first he thought it was propaganda. He was like, oh,
Wow.
this is just part of like and then he realized very quickly it wasn't. But he, just like that game, that mind game of that, he was like, oh, this can't be real. And then
That's a great point. I didn't ask what year it was that y'all met and whatnot. So he was just serving, and then all of a sudden it got really real, huh?
Well, no, he was in boot camp. We didn't meet till 2008, 2009, but in 2001 was when he was in
Okay.
boot camp.
Okay.
So yeah,
All right.
he went in right out of high school, and that's why he was like, "Is this part of boot camp? What's happening?"
Wow, this is
That was
really
crazy.
real. Yeah.
Right. But I
Okay.
think what's interesting about my age group is I have met many Marines who maybe they haven't done a career. Most people don't, but they saw what happened in 9/11 and they just felt called to serve, and they literally stopped everything and enlisted right there. And that's kind of, I mean, I think that's a really amazing thing to still see. That's in we don't see that nowadays as much, just because thank God we have not had that sort of experience, but where you see people who have jobs, they have careers, and they're like, no, I've got to serve my country. That's pretty neat.
I think it's something a lot of people, if they don't have military in their family, don't understand. But the fact that it's a volunteer army or volunteer
Sure. Yeah.
Marine, Navy, whatever, that's still amazing. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I love about talking to veterans is, I mean, you literally gave a blank check to the government and said, "I'm at your disposal. Send me whatever we
Right.
need to do." And that's men, women, whatever. That's a hell of a statement to make. It's always that, and again, that's why I love telling these stories. We want to be an encouragement for those that are in and thinking about getting out of. How do you navigate that? And that's about what we're about to unpack here. But why I always want to hear why you went in and what path you chose going in and stuff, because that's the why explains an awful lot of the what. Sometimes
Right.
I had a childhood friend who went in to avoid going to jail. He was headed down a road with some bad friends, and he wasn't in trouble, but he was well on his way to getting here. So the Navy saved his
That
life.
sounds like, really, I was going to say that sounds like a future Marine.
Oh, me. The other thing I enjoy talking about the military spouse side of things, I think quite often, and maybe I'm wrong here, correct me if I am. I think quite often when your military spouse, like you sign on to that life, but in a lot of ways, and Danielle shared this, she's like, you kind of put your life on hold and you think maybe, all right, that'll be a year and we'll move and get stationed somewhere and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do. And you look up and you've got 3 kids and 20 years have gone by. You're like, what happened? And with that, a lot of times you go, okay, well, maybe I really can't have a career until my spouse gets out. And what I love about the military spouse side of things, and this was an eye-opening thing for me coming to Cirrius and getting involved with hiring our heroes, I never had put 2 and 2 together about how much harder. I mean, the veteran, the service member, they get picked up and sent wherever. They have a job. That's why you're going. But
right.
Again, a lot of times you're not in a major town. A lot of times there aren't great career opportunities where you're going. So I think something like Salesforce provides a remarkable thing where you can learn it anywhere if you can get on the internet. And in the world of working remote, this doesn't disrupt your career at all. So tell me, since he's not out yet, you chose to go down the HOH path and some things before there was separation, before you became the single breadwinner, any of those kinds of things. What prompted you to find those resources and do what you did when you did?
I mean, I listened to Danielle's podcast and I thought it was so good. She actually is the one who interviewed me. So I've always really enjoyed watching her story. And I don't disagree that there's this feeling of, like your life is maybe on hold, maybe your career's on hold. Although I was so grateful for it. I really wanted to be able to stay at home with my kids. And I noticed anybody who's going to provide for a family, like even my own dad, he was gone every summer because that was the busy season for ag. One of my side jobs I did was an executive assistant, and that guy for a big development company, he traveled all the time. And so I did know that there are give and takes. If I really wanted to be able to stay at home, I was going to probably be with somebody who worked really hard, and that would mean some sort of travel or whatever that looked like. And I was just really grateful for that. But my husband and I had always discussed that when it came time for him to retire, that I would, work again. And that was me saying, yes, I'm going to do this so you can figure out what you want to do. The funny thing is that in his own path, he has kind of become technical. I think I know he's tested really high. And so he's kind of got some specialties that he's going to have a job right away when he gets out. But he sat me down a few years ago saying, I think it's time to retire. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to start networking and seeing if I can find a career, because I knew we would still be moving a couple more times. And I had moved my teaching license multiple states. And honestly, I hate quitting. I really do. And so when you're in the military, it doesn't mean you're automatically going to move in the summer. And so to get into a school and potentially have to leave in like January as a teacher, I find that to be worst case scenario. You don't want to do that. So I would be substitute teaching, or I worked a lot. When we were in California, I worked for a company that helped students prep for the SAT and ACTs. But again, like I just felt like, okay, I need to find something outside of teaching. And when I was in high school, I took Cisco networking courses, and I really enjoyed being around these very smart people. And Cisco network, like if you think of Cisco, Salesforce is a software, computers themselves are hardware, and Cisco is that in between, that networking and how they connect. So I just thought, oh yeah, I'll get back into Cisco. Fine, that'll be easy. But then when I started, we actually lived on base at that time, and I had been telling another military wife what I was looking into, and she said, you have got to go to the Family Readiness Center. I didn't even know what that was. I'm so grateful for that, because I walked into the Family Readiness Center. I talked with this very nice lady who said, you're a former teacher, you need to do Salesforce. And they had this whole printout that explained the path to Salesforce. And at that time, we were living in Tampa. And Tampa has great networking events. And so she said it just happened to be timing wise that a few weeks later, in downtown Tampa, there was a woman who just did this exact same thing, and she was going to talk about her experience. And so I got to meet this lady. Her name is Tiffany, and she was very honest. She was honest about the fellowship. She was honest about the studying time. She was honest about the job itself now. And I feel like I just said, it just felt right. I was like, oh, I'm going to really give this a good try. And my husband at that point, he was home mostly, but he was gone for like a month at a time sometimes. And so I moved our desktop computer into the dining room. And I just, every day when the kids, like I had still a little kid at home, but the other two were at school. And every day I just spent at minimum 4 hours a day working and trying to learn this whole new program. And it took me because again, it was, there were some days I couldn't spend any time, but it took me about 6 months. And then I had, maybe a little less. And then I took the admin exam. And to be honest, I realized I still did not have an understanding of it. I learned best in this situation where we're talking.
Right.
And so somebody connected me with Merivis, and that was a godsend. They have courses for people trying to get certified, and they had this 1 week intensive class. And so my mother came out and watched the kids, and I spent, I think it was like 9 to 5 in a class every day. And then I was able to pass the exam.
So this is in person stuff then, right?
No, it wasn't. It was still virtual, but it was where you're really, you're still talking with somebody. You have like a small groups where you like talk with the people in the group. And I actually am still friends with the people from my small group. So we kind of see where everybody's at in the world. And we're, honestly, Merivis to me was like game changing.
Good. What, when you found out about this study, do you remember what year that was?
Yes, it was 2021.
Okay.
Maybe 2022, because I started here in 2024. Yeah, 2022 is when I heard about Salesforce.
So this is backside of COVID. This is everybody's working from home. Everything is kind of the way to do it. Okay. Right. Just wondering, like I know when I came to the ecosystem, Showhead didn't exist, and you could go do YouTube videos. There was some stuff out there. There was content creation, wasn't the cult that it is now, but there was some good stuff out there. But yeah, that networking, and I can't imagine what it's like on the military side, because just networking in this space in general is a cool thing. I was talking to Tom House, the new head of Salesforce Military, yesterday about them kind of reinvigorating that program. And I told him, I said, the single best thing Salesforce has done in 20 years, in my opinion, is when they created communities. When they created a place when people like you and I, whether from the same company or not, can connect and help one another out. We don't have to go to Twitter or wherever to connect and do that. And it's just been life-changing for my family coming into this space. And I had to do it the harder way when it was classic. There wasn't lightning. and there wasn't near as much content out there from a teaching perspective. But I know how Merivis approaches that, where they kind of come in with a project and you have a team and you have to work together and you figure out different roles. And that's real exemplary of what getting into the space is like. Not everybody wears the same hat. Three people go into the same meeting, but you all go in with a different role. One of you's navigating the conversation. One of you's, like a BA might be taking notes, things like that. There's just a lot that goes into it. And that's what I love about it is I'd love to ask the person who said, oh, you were a teacher, you got to look at this, because a teacher listens a completely different way.
Sure.
So great to hear. So that led you to Salesforce. Coming through the Family Readiness Center and discovering that. What led you to Cirrius?
So, first of all, I think I just won the lottery. Of all the companies, I am so grateful. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on Cirrius Talk, but just like part of the hard part about the fellowship, which is my path to Cirrius Solutions, which with Salesforce, it can be hard to break into the ecosystem. And so so Salesforce has this path through the Hiring Our Heroes Fellowship. And what the fellowship does, you have to at least have your admin cert, and then they will publish your resume to all of these companies who are potentially looking for jobs. But essentially, like, you have 12 weeks where they'll take you on and you kind of get on the job learning. And by the time I came in, which was 2023, so the end of 2023 is when my resume went out, then there was only like maybe 3 or 4 companies who came, while the year or two before, like Danielle's year, I think they called them there was like 80 of them. There was a huge fellowship number. And I think that was the last year that it was really big, where there was a big hiring boom. But really there was Cirrius Solutions took on 2 fellows, Booz Allen took on a few. And I want to say there was 1 or 2 others that maybe took 1 fellow. And so out of a group of like maybe 30 people, only I think 8 people got a fellowship. So when I say I feel like I won the lottery, because all of those people were great, I really do. But when I got interviewed, loved talking to Danielle, loved talking to Kingsley. And in the end, the beautiful thing about this is that I was networking. I had Merivis. And so on the side of this, I was, telling people I didn't know if I was going to get a fellowship. And there was a few other people who had connected me with other ways into Salesforce. And so I also had some other interviews lined up. And so I don't think the fellowship is the only path. And when people say network, like, what does that mean? It just means, like, what does that mean? It means I showed up at my local Salesforce user group, which just put your face out there and be like, hey, you don't have to talk about, that you need a job. You're just saying, hey, I just want to hear what's out there. And I was open to not doing Salesforce jobs. But once you get into a company, sometimes they will hire, if you're already in, they will hire you quicker than if you're just, trying to get directly into that job. So my math background, I was interviewing for helping with taxes, stuff like that, and at the same time, even my husband was like, you don't have to get a job this year. And I was like, it's too late. I've started the Salesforce process. I'm going to get a job.
Yeah.
Do it.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's another thing I think is interesting. We joke, and almost every episode this comes up, the concept of being an accidental admin. Like, you didn't go to college for this, right? And your career counselor in high school didn't tell you about a Salesforce career. Most of us were out doing something and kind of found our way in here. But the other great thing is once you get here, it's its own train of learning and applying and just getting your hands on. But at the same time, it doesn't matter where you come from. That experience from whatever that was also becomes relevant. I spent 20 years with a toolbox and steel toes traveling around fixing things. Yeah. And I got here and I landed on a team doing field service. Okay. The only reason I do CRM is because I got sick and tired of being in the field, and the people from the mothership and the corporate office kept asking for information. So I would work 15-hour days and have to go to a hotel at night and write reports. The concept of mobile entry, part of that was the time I was doing it, but the concept of mobile stuff and passing things around, like, that never dawned on me. But showing up here, I'm like, this is field services, not the product. Doing service in the field is what led me to get involved with CRM in the first place. So all that experience, the struggles, the battles, the empathy of what people go through in that brought value for me to be in this space. You as a teacher understand the concept of keeping up and learning and passing information and all those things. It's all still relevant. So to your point, it doesn't matter what your background is. If you can just find a way to get your foot in the door, and you didn't say this directly, but there's a big difference between having a cert and being ready.
Yes.
But being physically present, right? Going to a networking event in your local town, you'd be surprised how many places have user groups. Being physically present, being involved, and just be willing to say, yeah, raise your hand. And that gives
Right.
you a lot of opportunities, some of which we'll talk about here in a bit. Fantastic. I do remember you coming on. I think in 2022, there was probably, we were getting 20 to 30 resumes at HOH. The year in
Yeah.
2023, we were getting about 70. I think in 2020, I think it was the end of 2023, we got like 150 in one cohort. And it was just
I think
impossible.
that's,
Just so much to go through and so many great people to
yes.
pick from. It was really hard.
I think that's Danielle's
We hit the
dream.
lottery. We pulled some great folks out of those. So,
Well, you interviewed Samantha, and yeah, I
mhm.
mean, it was honestly we are the last fellows as of right now that have been hired at Cirrius, and I was really thankful to be able to do that with her, and that was great.
Yeah, Sam actually had some good IT experience, so she knew how to write user stories and knew how to
Yeah.
sit in front of a client and ask questions. She came really ready to hit the ground running. What do you remember about your fellowship? What stands out? I know from my side, I got here and didn't know anything about hiring our heroes, but I was
Hmm.
a mentor for several cohorts. And you guys, this is not a calm, boring classroom about learning technology. Like you better come in and roll your sleeves up because you're going to be busy. But what were some things you remember from that time?
Like having a fire lit under me that I needed to get my face out there and make sure that people knew that I wanted to help. Because here's the thing, when you're in the fellowship, you can't bill hours. So you're not billing the client for my time. So I understand how the team would be like, oh, there's this Emily person, but the team wasn't like that. They were great and they gave me a lot of opportunities to learn. If the hard part about remote work is if you don't, like, let's say you're just not feeling it today and you just don't show up or you don't, make yourself be somewhere or ask to be included, you could really like slide into the background. And I think that's happened in the past. And then it's kind of like, hey, nobody's gonna open these doors for you. And it's a subtle thing I don't know how to explain. It's either you understand or you don't. That just be helpful. And so every day I would show up. Actually, personality wise, I would say the more technical you are, probably the less social you are. Now that's not always true. And so sometimes you might feel like, for example, I'm very social and I might feel like I'm irritating people, but I just kept poking and being like, hey, what can I help you with? Or like, can I join that call today? And honestly, I have a really great relationship with everybody on the team. And even though I felt like maybe they were annoyed, in the end, we're all really good friends. And I think they were grateful. They were like, you're right. I don't want to do this busy work. And so I just got all the intro level work I could get. And I loved it. Sometimes I actually
Fair.
came to your team and I was like, can I help on your team?
Yep,
So,
I remember that those days. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so just a little background on where you sit today. You're a consultant on Team Bravo. You got promoted not too long ago. You're 7 times Salesforce certified. Google that if you don't know what that means. I think you're the first person from the CPQ side that I've had on. We have a lot of field service people that have come on so far, but CPQ is a different animal. Yeah, I think military prepares you for life in Salesforce because acronyms are everywhere. You'll drown in an ocean of them.
so
And
true.
I think I'm trying to remember. I was speaking to someone recently. I think it was Nick Stump saying there was an acronym in the Salesforce space that was also a military acronym, but meant something different. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
it took him a year to kind of get some of the military acronyms out and make room. You're a Trailhead Ranger. Which is kind of cool. I think we've talked a little bit about Trailhead and they kind of gamify. It's dangling a carrot to keep you coming back and taking more. As you do, you get points and badges. And after you get a certain amount, they call you a ranger. Great to have you there. A former math teacher. What type of math was it? What grade? What type of math were you teaching?
So I was certified middle school and high school. I middle school was kind of my bread and butter. Still to this day, I love that age. They're awkward, they're painful, and I just enjoy it.
Yeah, middle
They're
school's
fun to
tough.
me.
It is tough. Yeah. Yeah, but it's like before algebra and geometry, it's some basic math skills and stuff that's
Yeah,
to me, when a
I mean,
student gets that, it connects. I'm an engineer.
yeah.
I'm a
Oh,
math
for
nerd. I
sure.
love it.
I mean,
Cool.
to be honest, I had some students that were so smart. I didn't say this, but I was like, oh, I think they're smarter than me. Even in seventh grade, you could tell like these kids are going to go far.
Indeed, indeed. Let's talk about some work life balance. You wear a lot of hats. Wife, mom. Talk about some of your volunteer stuff you do in the local area. In consulting, I got to imagine if as a military spouse going wherever you go to try and find a career, consulting's a really hard one. It's very demanding. It's very taxing. We do remote work, and so there's a little bit of flexibility time wise. If you got to take a kid to a doctor, stuff like that, you can generally work that stuff out. But when you're here, and it's a very demanding job. What do you do after the workday ends? How do you balance out and stay sane and keep smiling?
Sure. I have to say, I'm still figuring that out. And I really am. But the beauty is, like, now all of my children are in school. And so I think I think it's good for me to have something that actually, otherwise I would obsess, I think, about them. And even my husband, I think I would take on his feelings maybe more than I meant to. And so I'm super thankful to obsess about Salesforce. I really am. And um, it just depends on the time of year. Honestly, I have really had to emphasize exercising again, just because like right now we're just sitting in front of a computer. And for me, I am just so mobile and active, and I have never had to really think about, oh, I need to work out just because I was playing with the kids or I was running around. Well, now I make an effort to either run or even now lift or do, I was like, look, who am I? But that is a game changer in terms of just like that thing, that mental health and like keeping that balance. Cause I don't think it's healthy for anybody to stare at a screen all day. And so I have to
Guilty,
like
Your
after
Honor.
that,
Yeah.
I have to really prioritize like, okay, especially on days that are back to back meetings, I have to be like, just like look away or like try to schedule some time to go walk the dog or something.
Yeah. People who've never worked remote will ask me a lot. It's like, how do you do that at your house every day? I'm like, hey, once my clock goes off and the first meeting starts, you're just kind of a passenger. You do it like you do what you would do in an
Yes.
office. But I will say, I've noticed over the last year, 5 o'clock turned to 6 o'clock, turned to 7 o'clock. It's really, really easy because especially if you have 6 hours of meetings during the day and you still have 6 hours of work to do, like the only
Right.
time you can really get work done is after quote unquote the clients have left the
Right.
office and let you do the other work. So great. Yeah. Activity. That's probably true for anybody, I would imagine. It's just good for your brain.
Sure.
But in particular, where we just sit and listen, I think it just sharpens your brain so much more to get out and look at a tree and go down a road
I
and
know.
stuff like that. So great. So you've been here just about 2 years. How would you sum up if yeah, I know we haven't gone back to the Hiring Our Heroes fellowship in a while, and it's long overdue time to do so. And I know from having mentored several fellows, y'all would have what they call them huddles on Fridays.
Uh-huh.
What
Yeah.
they were called. When y'all would have huddles, you might have 20, 30, 40 people come into a huddle and they're doing fellowships at 25, 30 different companies. So everybody's getting a differing experience, and not a commercial to promote Cirrius, but what would you say looking back on what you learned during your fellowship, and maybe even more so, what have you learned since coming on full time? Like what were there suspicions you had during the fellowship? Like, is this an act that's going on because I'm a fellow and they're trying to break me to see if I'm worth keeping on? And now I'm here and you've got your certs and you've got your position, you've been promoted and you're out here doing it. What are some things that you've learned during this time that maybe there were surprises coming into this that you couldn't imagine how much you would relate to and enjoy the position?
So, okay, to talk about Sirius specifically and seeing what the other fellows were experiencing at other companies, one thing I never really believed is that Sirius has a commitment to try not to not lay off their employees. And I can't impress upon like how rare that is in the tech community. Still to this
Right.
day, Booz Allen just did a bunch of layoffs. Salesforce itself does a bunch of layoffs. I know that sometimes it just has to happen, but Sirius Solutions, I can tell that they really put an effort in to spread loading, making sure that they have the work, making sure they don't hire unless they know that they are, committed to making sure people have work. That is a game changer because to invest personally from an employee standpoint into a company, it's so good to know that on the reverse of that, I feel like the management is investing in us. So I just can't like there's just a stress level that comes from that. I'm really thankful I have a husband who has a great job and it's a stable job, but I think the tech community can be pretty unstable. So that really scared me at first. And then on the flip of that, when it comes to the Hiring Our Heroes, I think this is like one of those things. If there's ever a time to take a risk, once you start getting your feet in the door and you start networking, like I hate using that word again, but you'll find that if something were to happen at one company, like, there are a lot of opportunities. It's just you really got to stay relevant. And my husband used to always say that in the Marines, like he's just always trying to stay relevant, even because again, like he's on a more specialist side. And so he's always trying to stay relevant with what he's learning. And that is so true here. And it's probably one of my things that I don't think I was prepared for, but you're never done learning. Just because I'm on a CPQ team doesn't mean we only do CPQ.
Right. Yeah, great point. I mean, we're kind of known for the field service and the CPQ space, but there's not a lot of clients just doing one or the other, right? That it leads to Experience Cloud and Data Cloud and Agent
Right.
Force and AI are the big letters that are running our life this day. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. But great point. And I got to say, sitting in the same position you are with that, there's something that changes your attitude about coming to work when you know people who lead the company are leading it the way they do. Right. And this is not an episode to just advertise for Cirrius, but I just kept hearing from fellows how different they felt their experience was versus other fellows.
Sure.
And I don't mean no slam on any of the other companies that are doing it. I've heard great things about Booz Allen and other ones as well. But you go put a lot into getting into this space, and you want to know that there's some security in that. And yeah, you can learn these and they're transferable. You can take it wherever. But it's very rewarding to be around people who just kind of seem to be like-minded, pointing in the same direction, aiming at the same goals. And it starts with the leadership here. I think a great example, we'll get into this in a second, was last year when Data Cloud and Agentforce got announced. And Chad Anderson, our CEO, was the first one to say, I'm going to get certified. Everybody's going to get certified, but he jumped on the train too. And man, that says something to me. Like, I'm the old guy. I'm like, I didn't really want to get on the cert wagon necessarily and go back to studying all those things. I don't know how many conversations I had with you about Data Cloud. I started doing the math, check my math. You had been here, you had 3 months off of your fellowship. So you did a 12-week fellowship. You came on full time. 3 months after that, you became the face of Data Cloud cert prep at Cirrius. Did you volunteer for that? Or did you just, were you in the wrong room at the wrong time and asked the right question and that just kind of got the hat you wore?
So our solutions architect on our team is Brad Steensma. And I remember talking to Brad, or as a mentor, Brad talking to me and saying, Emily, like, how are we going to carve out a space for you? It's something he did for Justin. It's something he was doing for everybody. And when Chad gave that challenge, Brad messaged me. He goes, Emily, this is your chance. And it really lit a fire under me. I was like, you know what? And I think I told my husband, I was like, I'm going to work 24 hours a day for the next few days. And I studied everything I could. There wasn't a lot of information. There was no study guide. And I was like, I'm going to, even if I fail, I'm throwing money at this problem. I'm going to be first. And I was the first to get the Data Cloud cert. Now I don't feel that pressure anymore, but especially when you're new and I think essentially your manager says, this is your chance. You're like, I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah. And that's honestly probably one of the greatest misnomers in this space. Nobody knows everything. Not even Frank. Well, we got to get Frank on here one of these days.
I think he does.
But you show up and we've called it imposter syndrome. There's a lot of names that go with this. But at the end of the day, nobody knows better than you that you don't know a whole lot. And you're just trying to find something that I can be the person to lean on. And the only way you become that person is to jump. I can see you running in the living room and telling your husband, hey, I got a mission today. I'm on mission. Great.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Can I tell you, I think as just a person, when you're invigorated about something, I think your family is too. When you say, hey, I got to do this, everybody's like, yeah, let me support you. And I'm not doing this every week saying, hey, I need to pull like all day, all night on this. I'm not doing that. But when that does come around, my family's very supportive. And when that time comes for them, I'm really supportive of them feeling like, yeah, I got to do this.
I got to think there's an empathetic side too you've been married for a while at this point, but you understand now kind of the power and enticement of a mission, right? That you get with a group, you gear up, you go do the thing and you survive it together, you fight together. I've got a lot of friends in law enforcement, same kind of thing, like that brotherhood, I got your six kind of a thing. I said, and I think that's my love for it is I grew up with a father who's in the airline business, like very heavily regulated, rigorous thing. And you get on a plane, you got to trust every person who turned a screw, tightened a nut, whatever, kind of did their job. And it was just a very matter of fact, you do your job and you do it right, kind of an attitude. Mm-hmm. In the military, same kind of thing. I can't do my job if I've got to look over my shoulder and question, is the person watching my back doing their job? And that's kind of, I'm not a parallel, but in consulting, like we all kind of go into our huddle, like here's the plan, break, everybody go do their part. And at the end of the day, those parts have to come together and work for the sake of our clients and the solution we're promoting. But there is something, there's a lot of energy that goes into that. And there's some gratification to wrapping this thing up and handing this virtual thing to a client who's so appreciates what you've done. Good deal. Was there any other surprises you can think about when you think about your career path? I mean, whether that be going from school to college to teaching, you mentioned some executive assistant stuff and where you're at now. Looking back over that, what are some lessons that you've learned, maybe have changed you as a person, who've enlightened you to who you are as a person, how you do your job, how you show up, why you do it the way you do it?
Now I got to think about that for a second. Honestly, I would have to say it's just about bringing value. If I was going to answer that question, I've really been thinking on it about how I would encourage my kids as they start mapping out their futures. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't have to do with a degree. It doesn't have to do with, this job or that job. It's not about picking one job. It's about bringing value. And honestly, something recently, actually, Frank, being able to work with him, which I thoroughly enjoy, he was talking with a client, and the client really just wants his opinion. And he goes, no, I need to bring some value to this. We're going to push something to production soon. Because
Right,
he
right.
is wanting to make sure that they are seeing that there is value to be had. And I don't think it's anywhere you go, you just need to bring value. And it seems like just a generic term, but I think if we keep asking ourselves that, whatever that is, if you're contributing in a way that's added value, and be critical of yourself, is this real value, or are you just like blowing smoke? That's the lesson I don't think I fully realized when I was younger, trying to pick out a job. Like, oh, I just need a job. I need it to like pay enough. That's no. Are you adding value in your community? And I don't think I realized how many opportunities there are out there to add value. So many.
Yeah, and I don't want you to undersell yourself here. That attitude you just described, I don't find that to be very common. It's one thing that led me to coming here is I got to know some people at Cirrius and how they approach things. And when I would reach out as a customer, when I would reach out and talk to people at Cirrius, as far as I knew, I was the only client they had because they always responded.
Yes.
And more than just like yes or no or here's a link, like they actually tried to help.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something in the people that we've hired. I mean, yes, it's part of the culture about how we want to do our jobs. People trust us with money and their solution, and we want to give them the highest value solution we can. Like we talked with Will last week about AI. Like AI is a helper who shows up and hopefully makes me more efficient at the things I'm trying to do. So whatever the customer's spending with us, I want to do more with that than they expect. And I don't know that that's common amongst just your average Joe and Frank out in the world. I've always kind of taught my sons, like, wherever you are, find the job that nobody wants to do and volunteer for that job. Because the more well-rounded you become, and I think you thinking about over your career, you've reinvented yourself a couple of times. It's no longer about that job. It's about who you are. It's about you being a resource that people can trust and lean on. So as you look back over that, I mean, what a remarkable lesson to teach your kids, and I think this is true about the more I'm talking to veterans. And I say just last week, sitting at that veterans memorial or the ceremony thing, I had a whole different appreciation for the people I was sitting in a room with than I did a year ago. And I had a love for the military. Like, I mean, I loved not watching Top Gun, all that kind of stuff. Who doesn't? But like truly knowing the people that put on the uniform and that they have families and they have family members that, that didn't come home. And that's why they signed up, or 9/11 happened. And you had that fight or flight. Either I'm going to go and serve or I'm going to run into a hole and hide because the boogeyman's coming to get us. Just there are people that are just wired a different way. And I think what you called out is a superpower, because it's what makes you really effective in this space. I did reach out to some of your coworkers about, tell me about working with Emily. The first one was, Emily is such a joy to work with, and I can always count on her to deliver. I don't know that technology is a joyous job. It's not the first adjective I would come to describe it, but those watching this, and if you watch it instead of listen to it, you'll see Emily smiling through the whole thing. And the other was, Emily is always positive, like a ray of sunshine, no matter what's going on. Those are choices. Those are choices you make to get up and approach it that way, to be available, to pivot, to go learn the thing, even if you don't feel like you're qualified or you're an imposter, whatever. These are remarkable things you choose to be. So as people are out there, either as a service member or a mil spouse, and maybe they see the horizon on that military time of service and they're going, okay, now what? Are we going to stay wherever we are? If not, we're going somewhere else. Will that opportunity be there? I want to find something that makes me universally valuable. You just called out a giant thing, and that's not a certification. It's not a degree, and it's not even a specific job or employer. It's an attitude and a choice that you've made wherever you go to be that way. Cool stuff.
Completely agree. Even if it's not Salesforce, I think what I would say to military spouses is there are so many resources, and I did not even appreciate them. And now we're coming to the end of my husband's career, but like, we did not live on base a lot. I would really argue you have access to a military base. Go on that base and see people are trying to help you, but you don't know until you talk to somebody to be like, where do I go? Like, just go talk to some people. And if doors open, go through, like, go check it out.
And that's something we'll definitely put links to Merivis and Hiring Our Heroes in the show notes for this episode, which we try to do every episode. But I want to begin cataloging more of these things in specific resources and organizations that do what those two companies do, but more so kind of generically, here are different things that you find on this space. And It's come up in the last 2 or 3 episodes. Every base has a blank. That might be a building you go into. It might be a person. It might be a program. It might be a community. And don't choose just one, right? Make the most informed decision you can. And you're going to do that by looking out to multiple resources.
I want to answer that then. Every base has a family readiness office or a family readiness program. Like, go find that place. That's what you need to find.
And do you wait until you need something to go do that? Or would you recommend doing that as soon as you possibly can?
Well, I think when you're ready, go, I don't know what to say. That's probably different for everybody. For me, I guess I didn't really go until I needed it, but it would have been better to have had, at least if I had known, right? If I had known, I would have gone to every base that I lived near and just checked in to be like, hey, what's going on in the area? Like, how are you doing? Just put your face
I can see you doing that. Totally see you doing that.
Actually, somebody asked me, they're like, are you a realtor? I was like, absolutely not. I'm not a realtor.
So that brings up a couple personal questions I want to throw at you. I did not tell you these were coming.
Oh, great.
On LinkedIn, you have some endorsements. You got 7 endorsements for your relocation skills. Yeah. You didn't know you had those, did you?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it had real estate and a couple other things, but I was like, well, relocating, military spouse. All right, that makes sense.
That's funny. I did not know that. Well, say anytime, Cirrius is the only job that has not afforded me this benefit, but any job I've ever had, I end up driving around the local areas and I get to know neighborhoods very well, but not
Good
here.
Deal.
Thanks a lot, Cirrius.
Good deal. Well, I'm glad to help you learn something about yourself today. Good to know.
That's really funny.
And this is Emily's self-description. An average player of spades, a mid-level ping pong player, and an absolute pro at enjoying good food. Is that still an accurate description? That came off your Trailhead profile.
Absolutely. That's funny. Yeah, that was my initial. So we were just laughing about this the other day. My daughters are wanting their ears pierced. And I told them, I was like, the only way I got my ears pierced is I had to beat my dad at ping pong. So
wow.
I was like,
motivation.
When you can beat me at ping pong, you can get your ears pierced.
Yeah, I grew up in the 80s. So I think the first time I had a conversation about piercing my ear, my dad said, you pierce your ear, I'll pierce your nose. And it didn't go over well at my house. Different time. All right, last question.
Okay.
Given the opportunity, what advice would you give to a younger Emily? Would you go the same road? Do you choose the same resources? Is there one thing looking back you would do differently? The thing you wish you would have done that you didn't, or things you did do is like, that probably wasn't the best use of my time or resources. How do you look back?
So I don't really have, I have, I think one regret in college, and it was something silly. And from that moment, I remembered I don't ever want to feel regret again, which is probably why I'm so outgoing. I don't want to regret missing an opportunity anymore. So I don't think I would change my path. I would take more risk. I come from a very low risk family. I think Nebraskans are very low risk. And I think I would take more risks. I would take more risks financially with investing. I would take more risks with those kinds of things. Like, I felt like me going down this path was a risk. I would have done it sooner. So those kinds of things, I would just take. This is like me becoming to Cirrius was investing in myself, and that felt risky. Why? I don't know. If I was going to tell my younger self, I'd say just be a little bit more risky.
Good
That's
deal.
what I would say. But can
Emily,
I also say, I know a lot of Marines, and I would tell them to be less risky. I
was going to say, surely she's going to say to them, be more risky. Yeah.
So this is just for myself. I would say, as someone who's low risk, be more risky. Yeah.
There you go. What an exciting thing to have. And I can't believe it's only been 2 years. I just look back thinking different people who come through a fellowship, they wind up here full time. You're just trying to justify your existence, right? Just fake it till you make it. You're trying to learn something to be relevant. And again, just kind of blew me away that you'd only been here a total of 6 months, counting your fellowship when you took off. And I remember feeling like an idiot in the room. How did you learn that? Where did you find that? Where you were practicing for Data Cloud? You've proven yourself over and over. But thank you for what you do. Thank you for your family sacrifice, your husband and your grandparents and parents alike. Man, embrace that. I hope that's something your kids see and value. I know the people around your family will, because y'all live that out. You're just great Americans who've put it out there and done what you had to do. And it's an honor of mine to get to tell stories and learn more about you guys, even if I've been around you for a while. But thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today on the Military Minute. I hope this conversation gave you a little clarity, some encouragement, and a reminder that you do have options no matter where the military sends you next. If something you heard today sparked an idea, don't let it sit. Check out the resources we mentioned. All the links are waiting for you in the show notes. While you're there, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss upcoming episodes. And share this with another military spouse or veteran who's trying to figure out their next career move. If you have any questions or comments on today's episode, feel free to contact us at SeriousTalk@SeriousSolutions.com. The address will be in the show notes. Would also like to extend a special thanks to Jason Fowler for allowing use of his song, Mystery Road. This is Greg Banks signing off. We'll catch you at the next briefing.